So, after doing some review of what we would look for in the grocery stores or farmers markets for choosing produce and making sure we're getting the good ones, in our opinion, and talking a little bit more about washing produce, why we do that, what are the things that we're trying to remove from produce before we consume it. Another discussion then comes up of okay, we've done all those things, and there's some produce that maybe we don't want to eat it just raw. Maybe we want to cook it because cooking makes it a little bit better in our opinions. And that's where this discussion takes us is how does cooking affect produce? Because there are ways that we want to cook produce that would maybe be the better choice, or there's definitely things that we want to consider in regard to how we cook produce, how long we cook it, what methods are used, and whatnot. So that's what these slides will take you through. So let's take a look at some of these things we would want to think about. One of the things that can happen really easily when we're cooking produce is actually overcooking it. And a lot of times we're going to start to notice the impact in a few different ways. One of the ways that we would notice, we've overcooked produce, is that the color is lost or it dulls. Especially when we have something like a saucepan where maybe we're boiling some of our produce or maybe like doing some sauteing. A lot of our stovetop cookery methods, if we cook our produce too long, I could have something like these Brussels sprouts here that have a very bright green, vibrant color, and all of a sudden they look very, very dulled. And what'll be interesting is that my water is actually starting to look green. That's because all of the coloring, you have to think some of that's being pulled out of the actual produce and now it's in the water. So, yeah, your color is legitimately being lost and it's going to sit in that water or maybe the fat that you're sauteing the vegetables in or whatever the produce is. And then obviously that's going to make it look duller, okay? Texture. When we overcook produce, we have a breakdown in the texture. The cell structure starts to weaken and therefore our produce can become very soft, very mushy, to the point it can actually, some of it start to fall apart. And that's not what we would prefer when we are cooking our produce to eat it. Flavor can be impacted. You can start to lose it, or you might notice it becoming bitter. Simply because, think about it, if color can be pulled out of produce, well, then obviously flavor can be pulled out as well. And unfortunately, for some of our produce, if some flavor is pulled out, then yeah, it's going to change the flavor composition. And something that maybe should have been sweet is now going to be bitter. Something that should have been maybe more like a fresh, savory kind of a flavor, well, yeah, now it could become something else. So that would be another thing we could experience with overcooking. And then our last thing we could notice is that our nutrients, we're going to start to lose them. Because again, if color and flavor can be sucked out of the produce, well, then obviously there goes some of your nutrients too. So yes, it's all great and good. We want to eat things like fruits and vegetables, but if we're overcooking them time and time again, think of all the things that our body could start to miss out on if we are overcooking our produce. All right, so I'm going to pick on broccoli because I think broccoli is one of those where we can notice overcooking very, very easily. So as far as what it should look like after it's cooked, take a look at this picture. Bright, vibrant green. It looks like crisp, tender. It's definitely not mushy. It's holding its shape. It just looks really refreshing, and that's awesome. So let's take a look of what it should like, but then also, ooh, this is what it shouldn't be looking like. So again, if we've cooked broccoli properly, this is what we should be noticing. Crisp, tender, bright color, holding its shape. Yeah, it's looking pretty good. Overcooked, on the other hand, oof, 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 oof. Color, ooh, we definitely have lost color because look at how dull this is compared to this. Yikes. As far as texture, this was holding its shape, but look at this, the florets. They're starting to break down and they're falling off and they're looking mushier, and that's just not as appealing. Flavor wise, remember how we talked about much of what we see impacts what we think the taste to be? I guarantee you, a person sitting down to eat this is going to think, yeah, this broccoli is going to taste pretty good. A person sitting down to eat this, they don't even have to take a bite. They're going to just take one look and they're already going to think, ooh, I don't think that's going to be so good. And then all of a sudden, flavor is going to be impacted. And this could be a time where we start to notice a bitter flavor because so much has been pulled out of what should have been fresher, crisper, tender broccoli. And then we just said that with color and with flavor being able to be sucked out of a produce, well then obviously nutrients, this one is not going to be as nutrient dense as what this appropriately cooked broccoli would be. All right, and then just to show you an example of what does raw look like compared to what does properly cooked broccoli look like compared to what does overcooked broccoli look like. And you can see the differences. And we definitely can see, yep, there's some stuff going on here that definitely lets us know we cooked it too long. Another produce I like to look at is spinach because spinach can start, or like collard greens or kale or whatever the case is. Think of anything that's very leafy green, kind of like what we're seeing here. So if we were to cook our leafy greens appropriately, look at how they're holding their shape, beautiful color. It still is going to have some of that crisp texture to it compared to if we overcook it. Oh my goodness, like the ribs and the veins are starting to poke out and it's just looking like mushy messes. It almost looks like little frogs sitting here, but they're not frogs. It's leafy greens, and it's like, oh no. So if a person had a choice at a restaurant, this is probably hands down going to be the preferred choice right here. Okay, versus what we have that's overcooked. So just some things to think about when it comes to cooking our produce and what can happen if overcooking were to occur. Okay, so before I end this slideshow, I do want to do a quick review, and this is something that you can just kind of think through in your head. Think about how do you know what to buy at the grocery store? Because now we're seeing all of this produce, and oh, look at how beautifully arranged it is, and imagine all the other little bins over here and shelves that could be full of so many other options of produce. But when you go to the store, think about things that you are looking for when you are buying your produce and come up with a list of 5 in your head. Just what would those things be? Because it's good to have those things in mind before we get to the store so that way when we get there, we can make choices that we're going to be okay with. Okay? So think that through and you can move on to your next tasks.